Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today doing an Ice Barrier deck profile. So I'm really excited to do this for you guys because this deck summons out some of the coolest synchro monsters in the entire game, like Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, and all of the other Ice Barrier dragons. I've changed up this deck a lot since the last time I profiled it, and I'm really excited to show you guys all those changes. So without further ado, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name scratched in every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your Patreon. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Revealer of the Ice Barrier. This card is an awesome 3 of in the deck. It has a really good effect that while you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent cannot tribute summon. And you can only use the following effects this card once per turn, that you can discard a card to special summon an Ice Barrier monster from your deck. Also, you cannot special monsters for the rest of the turn except water monsters, and if you would discard or send a cards from your hand to the graveyard to activate an Ice Barrier monster's effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead of one of those cards, which is a really good effect. We then play 3 copies of Seeker of the Ice Barrier. This card is a great 3 of in the build that can actually special summon itself to your side of the field. That while you control another Ice Barrier monster, defensive monsters that your opponent controls cannot change their battle position. And you can only use the effect of this card once per turn, that if you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon an Ice Barrier token that's an Aqua Water level 1, 0 attack, and 0 defense, which is a great effect just to get you an additional monster on the field. We then play 3 copies of General Wayne. General Wayne is a really awesome 3 on the deck that spells and traps sent to the graveyard to your opponent's graveyard are banished instead. It can only use the effect of this card once per turn, that if your opponent controls a monster and you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if this card is normal or special summon, you get to add an Ice Barrier spell or trap from your deck to your hand, making it a really good searcher, but also a great monster to put on your side of the field because it does have 2100 attack points. We then play 2 copies of Hexa, Spirit of the Ice Barrier. This card is a really awesome tuner monster that's going to help you go into all of your Dragon of the Ice Barrier monsters. That while you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters that your opponent control lose 500 attack and defense. And during your main phase, you can send a level 3 or lower Ice Barrier monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, this card's level becomes the same as that monster until the end of this turn, which is an awesome effect to level manipulate this card to be able to go into the exact synchro monster that you need for the exact level of the monster you need with this card. We then play 2 copies of Prior of the Ice Barrier. Prior is a really good 2 of in this build, but you only really need 2 copies of this card. It has a really good effect that if you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, but you cannot special summon any level 5 or higher monsters the turn you summon this card this way, which is an effect that you really need to watch out for as you're playing this deck. But this card is a great on-field effect that you contribute this card and then target an Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard except another copy of this card and special summon that target, which is a awesome effect for this card to have. We then play a single copy of Defender of the Ice Barrier. This card is a great card to send from deck to graveyard for your copy of Spirit of the Ice Barrier to become a level 3. It also has the ability while you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters that your opponent control cannot declare an attack if their attack is greater or equal to this card's defense, which is a pretty good effect. We then play a single copy of Spellbreaker of the Ice Barrier. This card is a great 1 of as well that has the ability that once per turn you can send an Ice Barrier monster from your hand to the graveyard, and neither player can activate spell cards until the end of your next turn while this monster is face on the field, which is a really good effect because then it makes it so your opponent has to deal with this card in order to activate spell cards. We then play a single copy of General Ryo of the Ice Barrier. This card is a great 1 of in this particular build, but you only need a single copy of this card. I love this card as a tech boss monster because when your opponent's monster effect is activated on the field and it resolves, they must discard a card or the effect is negated, and it's their choice, which is a really good effect to basically make your opponent go minus whenever they activate monster effects. We then play 2 copies of Silent Sea Nettles because it does give us a monster that can special summon itself to her side of the field besides a copy of Speaker, which is just really good. All you have to have is a water monster on your side of the field to be able to special summon this card to your side of the field, and it does lock you into water monsters for the turn, but that's not that big of a deal in this deck. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Moray of Greed. This card is a really good 2 in the deck that lets you shuffle 2 water monsters from your hand back in the deck and then draw 3 cards, which is a great effect to be able to put cards that you don't need in your hand, like your copy of your Spirit, back into the deck and then be able to draw 3 cards. We then play 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods. This card is great to be able to send Ice Barrier from our deck to the graveyard so we can get a search, and it's just a really awesome 3 of in the deck. We then play 3 copies of Winds Over the Ice Barrier. This card is a really unique spell card that I really love as a 3 of in this deck, because you tribute any number of Ice Barrier monsters to special summon from your deck that many level 4 lower Ice Barrier monsters with different names from each other. And then during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from the graveyard and then target one of your Ice Barrier monsters that is banished or in the graveyard and add it back to your hand, which is a really good effect to be able to grab back your copies of your Ice Barrier monsters from the graveyard. This card is also a great Foolish Burial target just to get into your graveyard so that you can get that grab back effect. We then play 3 copies of Medallion of the Ice Barrier, which is basically the Rhoda of the deck, letting you add any of your Ice Barrier monsters that you need from your deck to your hand. We then play 3 copies of Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier, which I believe was actually the structure deck name as well for this deck. But this card is a really good effect that when this card is activated, you get to target one level 4 lower Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard and special summon it. And while you control 3 or more Ice Barrier monsters that you control are unaffected by the activated effects of opponent's monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck. And you can only use one of this card's effects per turn, which is a great effect for this card to have, just being able to make your monsters have a little bit of protection. I really love this card as a 3 of in the deck. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Ice Barrier. Ice Barrier is a really good 2 in the deck that is pretty much a searcher for this particular build, that you can banish this card from your graveyard and then send 1 level 5 or higher water monster from your deck to the graveyard. Then you can add a water monster from your graveyard back to your hand, which is a great effect to be able to use on this card to be able to just grab any water monster that you need from your graveyard back to your hand. This card is the easiest way to get this card into the graveyard is by actually sending it with Foolish Burial Goods, and is our main target for Foolish Burial Goods to be able to send from deck to graveyard. We then play 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Impermanence is a great 3 of in the deck that's an awesome hand trap that lets you target a face-up monster opponent controls and negate its effects. It can also lock down spells and trap zones by sending this card to the field and locking down an entire column when flip face up, which is a great effect for this card to have. We then play 3 copies of Gozen Match. Gozen Match is extremely powerful in this particular build because each player can only control 1 attribute of monster, which combos extremely well with our copy of number 4 that we have in the extract, which makes everything into a water monster, which means as long as your opponent's not playing just water, they can't summon, which is really cool. This card makes me think a lot of Revelry of Warlords and your copy of your Zombie World, which is really interesting to combo those 2 cards together. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing a single copy of Trishula. Trishula is one of the coolest boss monsters in the entire game, and has an awesome effect. When this card is synchro summoned, you can activate this effect to banish 1 card each from your opponent's field, graveyard, and their hand, which is a great effect to be able to just get rid of 3 cards upon synchro summon. We then play a single copy of Trishula, Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier. This card is a great 1 of the deck that's just an awesome boss monster to be able to summon to your side of the field. It has an awesome effect that when this card is synchro summoned, you can banish up to 3 cards that your opponent controls. And if this synchro summon card in its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can special summon a Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier from your extract or graveyard, and its attack becomes 3,300. Then half the attack of any face-up monster your opponent currently controls also negate their effects. And you can only use the effect of this card once per turn, which is an extremely powerful effect. We then play a single copy of Gungnir, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. This card is a really good 1-of that has the ability once per turn, you can discard up to 2 cards to the graveyard to be able to pick 2 cards your opponent controls and destroy those targets, which is a great effect. We then play a single copy of Brionek. Brionek is a good one in the deck, and it is a hard once per turn because it did a errata of this card's effect. It has the ability you can discard any number of cards to be able to return the same number of cards from the field back to the hand, which is a really good effect, but it is a hard once per turn. We then play a single copy of the Sword Soul Supreme Sovereign. This card is a really awesome boss monster that's super easy to put on your side of the field, and also has a great effect that for each card that's banished, this card gains 100 attack and defense, and monsters your opponent control lose 100 attack and defense. And if this card would be destroyed by card effect, you can banish one card from your graveyard instead, and if a card becomes banished except during the damage step, you can banish one card from each your opponent's field and graveyard, which is an awesome effect to be able to stack with your copy of Trishula. We then play a single copy of Dragite. Dragite's super easy to summon to your side of the field, and as long as you have a water monster in your graveyard, it is a spell and trap negate once per turn. We then play a single copy of White Aura Whale. White Aura Whale is really cool because it's basically a Regeki on summon, which is really cool. That when this card is synchro summon, you can destroy all monsters that your opponent controls in attack position, which is a great effect. This card can also make up to 2 attacks on monsters during the battle phase, which is a great effect, and it also does piercing damage, which is a super cool effect. This card is a go-to boss monster that I summon all the time with this deck. We then play a single copy of Crystal Wing, which is the only non-water monster that we're playing in the entire deck. It's very easy to summon to your side of the field, and it's just a really good one-of. It's also a walking monster negate. We then play a single copy of Crystron Quandrax. Quandrax is really good because it lets us synchro summon during the opponent's turn, which is great to be able to summon out your copy of White Aura Whale, which is just a great card to be able to summon during the opponent's turn because it will disrupt the opponent by destroying all their attack position monsters. Then play a single copy of number 4 to combo their copy of Gozen Match, because all face-up monsters on the field become water while this card's on the field, which is an awesome effect to be able to use with your copy of Gozen Match, because unless your opponent's playing water, they can't summon when you have those 2 cards on the field. We then play a single copy of Abyss Dweller to lock down Graveyard, one copy of Bahamut Shark to be able to summon out Toad, which is really good because it's a monster negate, which is really, or basically an Omni negate to be able to destroy any card on the field and negate it, which is just really good and set it to our side of the field, which is an awesome effect for this card to have. We then play a single copy of Coral Anemone, because this card is a walking monster born, lets you target a water monster with 15 or less attack in the graveyard and special summon to a zone this card points to, which is a really good effect. And then finally, a single copy of Miss Starboy, because this card on the field lets all water monsters on the field gain 500 attack and defense, which is an awesome effect for this card to have. So, that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed. This deck is super fun to be able to play. If you guys have never played Ice Barrier before, I highly recommend it because it's super fun to be able to summon out your copy of Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, in an Ice Barrier deck, or any of the Ice Barrier dragons. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can come part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.